And we will get to the stewarding, in fact. Louis, it's been a very busy weekend for the stewards and the race directors. It's going to continue to be a busy weekend for them as well. Obviously, lots of drivers are being summoned, and they may be summoned even further into this show as we're doing it live. So, if anyone listening, please obviously take anything with a pinch of salt. We're doing it in advance before we know everything that's being declared. But there's been a lot of allegations of British bias across the weekend with timings of red flags, virtual safety cars becoming red flags. Like, are the stewards kind of in a position of damned if they do, damned if they don't?
I think that's just the way that modern Formula One is these days. You always have your fan bases, and you'll have those who think that the stewards are doing something that favors one team over another. I remember the days where the FIA were referred to as the Ferrari International Assistant. Um, we are just, it is definitely a case of damned if you do, damned if you don't. Regardless of what you think of the shooting decisions, they were at least fairly consistent this weekend. It's not like they were crazily changing them, especially when we were seeing the red flags in qualifying. They weren't always kept as double yellows for quite a while, whether it was Colapinto's crash, whether it was Sainz's crash, whether it was Alonso. Any of those red flags were usually not immediate. They were usually preceded by quite a lengthy double yellow double yellow flag. So it's difficult. Should the red flag come out earlier? Yes. Yeah, I think we can, given the conditions, given, the fact that it's qualifying, cars are still going relatively fast, even if it's not, if it's yellows or not yellows. But, they were consistent. So clearly they have some sort of internal rules going on where that is the procedure that they follow. But a lot of drivers were a bit annoyed. Some drivers were probably a bit thankful because they were allowed to complete their laps. But in the race, the red flag came pretty pretty quick. Any sort of safety car decisions were sometimes a bit slow. When Hulkenberg went off, it was a bit slow. I was surprised on how long it did take for the virtual safety car to come out when Hulkenberg was just completely in the middle of the road and not moving. But yeah, I think coming back to the question of if there's bias, I don't think there's bias personally, but definitely needs to be a little bit clearer on what these procedures are, because I think it left a lot of people wondering why it's taking so long for certain decisions to be made.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just about to come on to that as well. Phil, where do you stand on this? Like, it does feel like the lack of transparency and, whilst it was better today, like the lack of consistency as well is leaving the stewards and the race directors at the mercy of allegations of favoritism. And given the decisions made recently, is there any validity to it?
I mean, I would question a lot of what they've been doing over the last few years. They brought it on to themselves. You keep employing certain people that have made specific decisions. And so the lack of transparency goes across the entire sport. I mean, it's fundamental. And I think that's why, yes, you have a sport that we have a bunch of competitive teams now. There's more interesting races these days, but these are the kind of things that we're talking about. They can't make quick decisions. They can't, like, when you have all this technology and you have all these people, it's like this is supposed to be the highest form of motorsport, they say, but they can't come up with decisions for hours on end. I mean, and then they make these kind of calls for what is a full safety car, what's a red flag, what's a VSC, I mean, come on. I mean, it's kind of like in other other sports where they have permanent crews, or they should have permanent people in place. That's what has to happen here if they really want to have consistency, because then they'll have one person to go to if they want to. I mean, all these owners and team principals and drivers are all going to whine anyways. That's just what they are. But in the grand scheme of things, there should be consistency somewhere. And if there isn't going to be consistency with this, it's got the knock-on effect in many other areas.
Yeah, absolutely. Like consistency, transparency. I think they're the two biggest things that F1's viewership, F1's team members, F1's drivers are all kind of crying out for.